What's happening, everybody? College football here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. Listen, I've covered college football since 2018 on a regular basis for SiriusXM. I can't remember, even in my years of watching college football to now covering it for the last 7 years of my life. I've never can recall a day like Sunday where in the span of 15 minutes two Power Four college football coaches were fired. It was expected, especially on the Virginia Tech side with Brent Pry losing at home by 3 scores to Old Dominion to fall to 0-3. That was bad for a proud program in Virginia Tech. DeShaun Foster, like these are two really different situations. Um, Both these guys kind of fell into a certain situation. Brent Pry, I think, was in relief of Justin Fuente, if I'm not mistaken. You guys can correct me about that in the comments if you're a Hokie fan. Um, DeShaun Foster, like with UCLA, was a much different situation. DeShaun Foster literally took over UCLA during its biggest transition, in the program's history, where, UCLA, their head coach Chip Kelly, as his team was going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, making that transition, um, Chip Kelly just leaves and goes to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, wins the national championship. Now he's back in the NFL as the offensive coordinator for the Las Vegas Raiders. But DeShaun Foster, who's a running backs coach who was going to be with the Raiders, actually gets pulled back because he has relationships in that building and they needed to preserve the team. And he brings it in. And, I think he did a pretty admirable job last year, given, the press conference given the press conference that went wrong at Big Ten Media Day last year, where it was embarrassing. But yeah, I know they almost made a bowl. UCLA did, but finished 5-7. Brent Pry, like they had some good years with him, but both these programs started 0-3. Let's be real. Virginia Tech is, I mean, if you take out Los Angeles, Virginia Tech is easily the better job of these two. So the question here really is, if you're these two programs, what do you do? Because I think both these jobs are very different. Virginia Tech in the ACC has a chance to really do something. Lane Stadium in Blacksburg, that is a special place. Enter Sandman Blair's when they walk in. It is peak college football. UCLA, and take it from a guy who has lived in Southern California for basically every year out of his life except for basically 10 and a half months. Basically, we'll call it a year. When I first started working and covering college football at Washington, D.C., which is not too far from Blacksburg. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Virginia Tech, but I know from watching and covering college football for as long as I have, that is a special place to coach. Frank Beamer made that place go. UCLA really has not been a special place since Terry Donahue was around in the 90s. And, Rick Neuheisel, who I've gotten the chance to work with, Rick made that place, matter in the 2000s. And, he knows how special this place can be. But the reality of the situation is, man, if you fire your coach in week 3 and you're a Power 4 team, that means you're punting on the season. USC did this a few years ago with Clay Helton because it got really bad. And it got embarrassing on national television. For Virginia Tech, they had to get away from Brent Pry. You can't start the season 0-2. You had the game against South Carolina, but then you got embarrassed by Vanderbilt. Those are Power 4 teams. When you lose at home by almost 3 full touchdowns to Old Dominion, you can't survive. DeShaun Foster, they have lost to open the season. They got embarrassed by Utah. That's a Power 4 team. They got embarrassed by UNLV, Group of 5 team, and then they got embarrassed by New Mexico, Group of 5 team. They're 0-3. And 2 of those games were at home, where nobody was in the stands. UCLA is in a much worse spot than Virginia Tech right now. So, but the reality of the situation is This shows you how different college football is, where, you know, two teams in big leagues are letting go of their coaches now. And Virginia Tech, and it's going to be messy in Blacksburg and in Los Angeles. But let me do this real fast before I get out of here. Virginia Tech is going to be in a more advantageous position because I think there's some candidates that I actually think would be interested in going to Blacksburg because of the tradition there. And I think they've, in my opinion, if you're Virginia Tech, you have got to show Shane Beamer a blank check and tell him what's it going to take you to leave South Carolina. I don't think he'll do it because I think SEC is just much further above anything. But if you want to potentially go to the playoff and have a better chance at it, I think you have a better shot at doing it at Virginia Tech. But I just don't know if he's going to want to leave. If he's going to want to leave, Gamecock country and leave South Carolina for Blacksburg. For UCLA, I don't know what the fuck they're going to do, because at least now you have more of a runway to get something done. They were put in an impossible position. UCLA was. UCLA in February, when you already have the transfer portal and you have all this stuff, their head coach just left. Their head coach just left and went to Ohio State to take a demotion. Granted, he then ended up coordinating the offense for the national championship Ohio State Buckeyes and then parlayed that getting back into the NFL. It's just hard to be a head coach in college these days. Between, recruiting, transfer portal, NIL, all these other things, it's hard. But UCLA to be in the position that they're in right now is really embarrassing. Like, I've been around this program and I've grown up in this area. UCLA basketball is definitely the more powerful brand. And, that athletic department's been operating in a deficit for a long time. And, now they're in this position now where I don't know what more they could really do to invest in football. Because let's face it, you're in the Big Ten. You're the second best team from California in the league. You're the worst team on the West Coast in that league. And you're fighting to just stay out of the basement in an 18-team conference. Who's going to want to coach that? If you want to get paid a lot of money, great. But you have to be like a really, and you've got to convince the athletic department to, the people and the boosters there to, put in resources. That's the problem if you're UCLA. And I've heard the name Dan Mullen thrown around. He's at UNLV. He just beat them. Brent Brennan at Arizona in a Power 4 conference. Would he leave and go to the Big Ten? People have said Jed Fish. Jed Fish is already at a better West Coast program, and he's probably going to go to the NFL or Florida or Michigan, one of the bigger programs he would leave for. And Florida may be open with Billy Napier, but I think the bigger thing to take away is how expendable coaches are within, college football. And if you don't get it done quickly and you're not able to, adapt to the times, you're going to get swallowed up really quick. And what happened with Brent Pry and what happened with DeShaun Foster, both two really different situations, but, expectations are a certain way. And, DeShaun Foster wasn't ready for it. Brent Pry did okay early on, but you can't start 0-3 in a power league, especially with the losses that those guys had. You just can't. You just cannot do that. So they had to move on. They had to reset things. We'll see how these situations play out over time. Anyway, we'll have a lot more here. I might have some more on UCLA and the position that they're in at some point. But thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.